Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome into the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, April 25th, 2016. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the people's champ, Matt Baxendell. The Todd Sibley situation is interesting to me. I think every Buckeye fan knows by now, Sibley, who is still technically in Ohio State's class, the 2017 class, the running back from Akron-Hoban, has been asked to gray shirt. You and I have talked about this before. I think there's no way he is going to gray shirt. He's not some low three-star kid. He's going to go somewhere else on scholarship. He's now taking a visit to Michigan State, and there's a very interesting thread on our board. And here's where I'm a little surprised and almost proud of Buckeye Nation. I figured that the vast majority of people would say, you know what, it's big boy football. We feel for them. A lot of people are bothered by this. A lot of people really seem where they understand it. They love Urban. It's not like they're ready to not be Buckeye fans or anything like that. But I think there's more compassion on the front row message board than what I expected. Your thoughts, Bax?
Well, I think it's because we've all railed against over-signing for so long. Whenever the SEC was pulling in 35 kids in every class, and Ohio State played Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl, and Arkansas had signed 20 more kids in the previous 4 years. We all hated that. We all thought it was a massive competitive edge. And part of the edge that they had was taking kids and gray shirting them. The difference, of course, being is that a lot of those kids were signed thinking they were going to play that fall, and then were told over the summer, hey, you need gray shirt till the winter. So this is a little different in that Ohio State's coaching staff is recognizing that maybe there's not exactly the fit they had thought originally. They're trying to give Sibley more time to find another option. But it's against everything that I think we as Buckeye fans have stood for about 10 years now, or even longer since the over-signing thing really became such a major issue. And, it's also happening to an Ohio kid. It'd be one thing if Sibley was a kid from, Oklahoma or California or Florida or something, and we were like, well, we don't directly connect with him because he's not an Ohio kid, and, you have to offer kids out of state to get their attention. Generally, Ohio State has been really careful since the first year that Urban was here about offering kids in state. Remember the whole committable offer thing that people hated too? And so Urban and staff backed off of those quote-unquote, whether the offer was committable or not, and just told the kids they needed to camp versus giving them a quote-unquote offer that maybe wasn't really acceptable at that point. And I just think we as Buckeye fans, this isn't the type of thing we like to see done to Ohio kids. And, I think it's so far ahead of signing day that it's not going to be some horrible major black eye kind of story because Sibley's going to have 10 options after this. But it's the type of thing that we just generally have not liked to see happen with Ohio State, and certainly not when it comes to Ohio recruit.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Let's say the staff feels like Todd Sibley, they just have reevaluated him. They feel like he's going to be another Warren Ball, where he could be a program kid, a kid that's a fourth-string running back, never gets in trouble, good kid. If you had an emergency, you could put him in there, but he's never really going to play at Ohio State, and the coaches feel like he is never going to play for us. Could you make the argument that it is better now for Todd Sibley, even though it sucks that he's getting the rug pulled out from under him as far as Ohio State, that he's finding out now that he can go somewhere else and actually have a chance at playing, as opposed to Ohio State saying, okay, we're just going to take him because we feel bad for him. He's an Ohio kid, but he's never going to play here. Could you make the argument that it's actually good for Todd Sibley to maybe find a new place?
I mean, you're absolutely right there, Dave. There's no doubt that the coaching staff has a good reason in their eyes for what they're doing. I think the difference between the fan base is going, oh, God, we hate this stuff, versus going, is it the right move, is a completely different story. If Todd Sibley and the coaching staff side is not even a top 2 or 3 available tailback for them this year that they think they can land, and it doesn't look like it, and frankly, if Todd Sibley's going up to Michigan State and they're not offering him a scholarship right away, then maybe he isn't necessarily going to ever play at OSU, and that's just a roster spot getting taken up. And, I think, I forget who it was who said the quote a while back, but they said that, in recruiting, you're not hurt by the ones you miss, you're hurt by the ones that you get and you're wrong on, because they take up a roster spot for a couple of years. So I'm not saying it's necessarily even the wrong thing for Todd Sibley or for Ohio State. I think just the whole process is the type of thing that we as fans we can sort of shrink away from and kind of curl away and go, ugh. But, Todd Sibley's going to end up going somewhere like a Pitt or something like that where he's going to get to play right away. And I think this is an episode we'll all have forgotten after a while. It certainly seems to me like Ohio State staff explained it to Sibley the way that you just said it, in that this is probably a better opportunity for him once he gets over the emotional disappointment of having the OSU offer pulled away from him. And I think that's the way we all need to look at it. But, the way the fans react to things versus the way that the staff reacts is certainly going to be a very different thing on this one. And Honestly, I expect the fans to act this way because we as Buckeye fans have stood against stuff like this for a while. But on the other hand, Urban and company know what they're doing. And if there's ever anywhere you're supposed to trust Urban Meyer's decision-making, it's in recruiting. I mean, I think he's proven that repeatedly since he's gotten here.
It's almost like you can't talk about Todd Sibley without talking about Danny Clark, their high school teammates. They only played 1 year together, but they did win a state championship at Akron-Hoban, Division III state title this past season. I've made my stance very clear on this. I will make it clear after I ask you, in case anybody hasn't heard it. Yes or no question, as I've been asking everybody who's been on the show. Will Danny Clark be in Ohio State's 2017 class, yes or no?
I say yes because there's no way you can cut ties with him. I think this is unlike Todd Sibley in that Danny Clark you played at OSU for a couple of years. The kid is an Ohio State tattoo, for heaven's sake. He was offered before he played a game as a freshman in high school. This is a completely different story than Todd Sibley. He's been a Buckeye commitment for a couple of months, not a couple of years. And I know Danny Clark maybe hasn't panned out to be the top 10 national player like a lot of people were projecting on him whenever he was a true freshman. But you know what? If the staff's going to step up and make that big of a move and then involve him that heavily as a centerpiece of the recruiting class, not recruiting the rest of these kids that are forming this class, the truth of the matter is that if Danny Clark still wants to be a Buckeye, you have to have him in this class. You have to let him come in and compete because it's a way bigger black eye with the coaching staffs in the state of Ohio if you back off of Danny Clark after having him committed for essentially his entire high school career. It's just because there's a better kid from Texas or something. You cannot tell Danny Clark no. If he chooses to go elsewhere, which I don't think Danny Clark would choose to go elsewhere, then that's a different story. But you can't back off Danny Clark like you backed off of Todd Sibley if you want to keep pace with Ohio's coaches. Otherwise, every other kid who commits to Ohio State from Ohio in the next couple of years is going to be looking over the shoulder wondering whether or not it's going to stand.
Very interesting. You and I disagree on this. I am adamant that he will not be in this class, and I think there's ways that Ohio State can do this, and coaches will understand. I know Danny has a father that's very active, in everything that he does, and I think Ohio State can find a way of doing this without burning any bridges.
How?
I agree. It's very, very, you're walking on eggshells, and I get that, but, well, frankly, I'll be honest with you. I mean, Todd Sibley, to me, is a better prospect than Danny Clark. If you can back off of Todd Sibley, in my opinion, you can definitely back off of Danny Clark. I don't care if he has a tattoo. I don't care if he has 5 Ohio State tattoos. I mean, that's just, he's just, Danny Clark to me is not Ohio State caliber. And whereas Todd Sibley, I at least could squint and see him being Ohio State caliber, even though I didn't really think he was. To me, if you can back off of Todd Sibley, which they have, you can easily back off of Danny Clark.
Yeah, but it's not just in terms of recruiting, ratings at this point for these guys. It's not whether or not Danny Clark or Todd Sibley is a better prospect at this point. It's the amount of time that's been put into Danny Clark being a recruit in this class. I mean, you can't offer Ohio kids early and accept their commitments again and have coaches expect you to believe it if you move away from Danny Clark. Danny Clark is a way bigger concern to me because this is how you start letting in people from outside the border to come in and say, hey, Ohio State took your kid's commitment a year ago, but then they told him, nah, they found somebody better from Florida. That's going to eventually come back and hurt Ohio State. It's eventually going to hurt our ties here in the state of Ohio. And it would have to be a miracle working job for some coaches to not look at this sideways and go, Danny Clark was committed there for 3+ years, and then they told him no. That's a big, big problem. I know Danny Clark isn't necessarily looking like the kind of guy that Ohio State would take right now if he was an uncommitted prospect. I don't think he's a horrible prospect by any means, but he doesn't really fit Ohio State's system that they run more than anything else is the reason I think Danny Clark would probably be a better fit elsewhere. From a pure recruiting sense, I don't think Danny Clark probably should be in this class. But everything else that's gone into Danny Clark, I don't think you can even come close to letting the guy go. You have to take Danny Clark if he wants to be a Buckeye because of the way it'll look for Ohio's coaches. Unless Urban can do miracles with these coaches, this is going to hurt Ohio State. Way worse than anything with Todd Sibley ever will.
Obviously, the coaches can't talk about this stuff right now. It would be great to hear, on the record what they could say right now, or even off the record what they could say about the Danny Clark situation.
Signing day, if he doesn't end up in this class, that'll be half the question.
But what we can go on right now is actions. And it seems like Ohio State, they haven't been in contact with Danny Clark lately, where he kind of pouted and went down to Alabama's spring game. Okay, tit for tat. That's, I get that. They pulled the offer from your buddy. They've been contacting you. Instead of going down to Ohio State spring game, you're going to go down to Nick Saban's spring game and really throw him back in Urban's face. Okay. But here's the deal. So we can just go by the actions of Ohio State's coaches right now. We're hearing they're not contacting Danny Clark very much. And furthermore, they're going after other quarterbacks hard. They're going after Tate Martell. They're going after Kellen Mond. They're going after other quarterbacks. And this is a class that is a very small class. if with already a numbers crunch, if they had a quarterback that they thought was going to definitely be in this class and they felt good about, why would they be going after hard 2 other quarterbacks? They don't want 3 quarterbacks, but you know what I mean. Why would they be going after other quarterbacks if they felt like Danny Clark was going to be in this class?
No, I agree with you. The coaching staff wants another quarterback. And I think the coaching staff is essentially telling themselves the same thing we're discussing right now. The discussion we're having is probably no different than they've had 5 times about how do we handle the Clark situation. Because a lot of these other kids who come in are better quarterback prospects. And more importantly, they fit the system that OSU runs on offense significantly better. All right, this Danny Clark's not exactly a JT Barrett clone. Let's put it that way, you know? And so the staff is certainly going after these other quarterbacks, and they're doing so because I think in their perfect world, they convince another quarterback to come in. They tell Danny, hey, you know, you're still more than welcome to be here. And Danny Clark goes, I'd rather be the only quarterback in whatever class I'm in. And they split ways amicably. That is the only way that I think they have an out here. I think that's the way that they're trying to angle it towards. But they certainly cannot outright tell Danny Clark no. And it's the biggest concern I have in this entire situation with this recruiting class because OSU's going to have the number 1 or 2 class at the end of the year. I think that's just a given at this point. It's going to be too small in numbers for it to be a guaranteed number 1 overall, but it'll probably be close if they aren't in any situation. But if Danny Clark doesn't end up in this class and it's a bad situation on his way out for Ohio State, then that's going to hurt them in recruiting in future years in Ohio. And Ohio is where we make our bread.
All right, last topic. Let's look ahead to the draft. It starts this Thursday. I'm thrilled. As you and I talked off the air, I just love the NFL draft, and you do too. A lot of our listeners do. It's just, it seems like we talk about it for just months. It doesn't seem like we do. We talk about it for months and months and months, and finally, it's going to be here this Thursday. Simple question for you, Bax. How many Buckeyes will be taken in the first round?
Joey Bosa, Darren Lee, Eli Apple, let's see, Taylor Decker, Ezekiel Elliott, and then those 5 I think are guaranteed. And I think one of the other second-round kind of guys, whether it's Michael Thomas or Adolphus Washington or Von Bell, I think they're going to get 1 more in the first round. So I think the number's going to be 6 at the end of the day. But I would love for it to be 7. And, you know, here's the one thing that stinks about trying to break the Miami record, is that there's only 31 first-round picks this year because of New England. Otherwise, they might have had an extra shot. So I think the Buckeyes will end up with 6. But I'd certainly dearly love for it to be 7 and break the record.
6 to me would technically be the record because they would have done it, had 6 picks when there was only 31 picks, as you mentioned. So it'd be, that little asterisk by the record there. Ohio State would have 6 when there was only 31 available first-round picks. So I would take that. I would take 6. I agree with you. There's 5 locks, I think, for the first round, and then Von Bell or Mike Thomas could sneak into the first round. I think Von Bell, I agree with you, probably has a better chance, but I could see either one of those guys maybe sneaking in and being that 6th guy, and maybe there will be 7. That'd be fantastic. We'll just tie the record, break the record. And then how many Buckeyes overall do you think will be taken? Will they tie their record with 14 overall?
Oh, it's going to be close. I think Jalen Marshall is a wild card at this point. I've had concerns about him and Tyvis since they declared to go pro early. I'm going to be optimistic and say let's tie it. I'm going to be optimistic and hopeful for those guys that they end up in a drafted position, even if it is the 7th round, and the Buckeyes get to that number. So, that tells you how deep this team is, that we're concerned about 13 and 14 getting drafted. That was just an amazing class that these guys were at Ohio State.
Absolutely, with a national championship in their back pocket. I think they have 13 locks. I agree, Jalen Marshall's that wild card. I think he will be taken, though. I think he could be even taken in the 6th round. I think maybe the Bengals might take a second wide receiver in this draft. They're going to take one early, maybe a 6th round pick late. Jalen Marshall could be taken there. So I think they will have 14. Maybe Chase Ferris will make 15, although I think he'll be an undrafted free agent. So I agree with you. I think the Buckeyes will tie their record with 14 overall. Great stuff as always out of the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. I really appreciate it, Bax. You can read his column every Sunday, The Bucket. And thanks to the listeners for tuning into the show. Hope everyone has a great day. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.